Hello, everybody. This is Jacob Sapochnik with the Enchanting Lawyer podcast. Welcome to the show. This is a show where we interview the most inspiring entrepreneurs and business people from all over the world who share their wisdom with us and help us become better at what we do. And today we have a very special and exciting guest. This is Bob Burg. And Bob is a well-known speaker, writer, and consultant. Bob is the co-author of The Go-Giver, Go-Giver Sells More, It's Not About You, and Endless Referral. And he has a new book that was released last year that we're going to be talking about today, How to Turn Adversaries into Allies at Work. And he presented to corporations and associations internationally, including Fortune 500 companies, franchises, and direct sale organizations. And I'm very, very honored to have Bob here today. Welcome to our podcast, Bob. How are you?
Thank you, Jacob. I'm great. The honor is mine.
Thank you. Bob, I was, like I told you before, I was following you for a while and, reading your books and your articles and trying to understand how you get into understanding people and what got you to write this book, because I think it's a very important book, especially in the business of law, or if you counsel people, and our audience are all professionals we're dealing with people every day. So why don't you share with our audience just a little bit about your journey into writing this book and your other books, and why did you write this?
Oh, well, writing this one is really, to me, a labor of love, because it's sort of a culmination, I think, of everything I've done at this point. And when it comes to the principles in this book, really, I can't think of anyone who I've learned them from more than I have my own dad, who is, to me, the embodiment of someone whose people skills, and his people skills have always just been fantastic, are really the result of his genuine caring about other people and about providing value to other people, making them feel genuinely good about themselves.
And yeah, it's funny that you mentioned it, because I had a discussion with a colleague the other day, and they were asking me, why did you start the Enchanting Lawyer, the Enchanting Way, which is the way of how we do business, being kind and nice. And I told them that, well, in my case, it was actually for my mother. The way she was carrying herself with other people. I never saw her fighting with anybody. Never saw her getting into an argument with anybody, ever. And I'm trying to remember now, but I cannot remember that. And it's different than my dad, who was more of a hot-tempered person. He was, he's a good person. I love him to death, but he always had a tendency to get into arguments with people. And so the difference between these two and the way trying to think differently is very interesting. So, in your case, it was your father. What do you think are some of the things that, in your book you say that anyone who in any way disagrees with you is your enemy. Is that what it is?
No, actually, that's a great question, though, because it sort of sounds like that when you first see the title of the book. And yet, you may come across someone who, Jacob, is really the nicest person in the world, but they're in a position, or the context is such that they're, for whatever reason, standing in the way of your personal or professional satisfaction. For example, let's say you have an item you want to return to the store. And if you're like I am, you lost the receipt, or you just didn't bring it with you. And you approach the customer service desk, and there's a big sign behind this person that says, absolutely no return without receipt. And so, this young person at the customer service desk, they may be the nicest person, but they haven't been equipped to know how to deal with a customer who's a good customer, who may have a reason for returning it and doesn't have the receipt. So we need to be able to work with this person in such a way that we're able to attain the results we want, while helping this person to feel good enough about this that they're working with us, as opposed to trying to work against us. It could be that you need to ask your boss for a raise, and you might love your boss, right. But your boss isn't going to give you a raise just because you need the money. there's going to have to be a better reason in terms of your from your boss's viewpoint.
Sure.
So they're at this point they could be your adversary in this regard, but they don't have to be. One of my favorite quotes of all time was from a man by the name of Sadaharu Oh. He was known as the Japanese Babe Ruth because he was the all-time home run hitter in Japan, actually in the world, because he had something like 861, and I apologize, I don't remember exactly, home runs, more than Babe Ruth, more than Barry Bonds, more than Hank Aaron. And what he said, what Sadaharu Oh said, I think is so very profound, and I think it relates to this. He said, I never saw the opposing pitcher as my adversary, but rather as my partner in hitting home runs. Now, when we look at this other person, whether it's our customer who's being difficult, or the boss, or the customer service person, or the a family member, or whatever, it doesn't mean that they necessarily see us as their partner, but we see them as our partner in terms of attaining our personal satisfaction while also helping them to feel good about themselves and about the situation.
Right. And so this way you can take away the negativity, the emotional negativity, and you try to focus on the positive part of it, becoming more of a partner, achieving your goal.
We move from adversary into ally, and this takes strength. The sages said, who is a mighty person? And they answered, that person who can control their own emotions and make of an enemy or of a potential enemy a friend. And when we can do that, now we're really 9 steps ahead of the game in a 10-step game.
Right, absolutely. Another interesting thing that you say in your book, and I want to ask you about it, is that what did you mean by be a judge and not a lawyer? And why do you think it's so crucial?
Well, this is actually a saying from the Talmud in which they talked about most of us, what we'll do is we will defend our position no matter what. And of course, this is what a lawyer is paid to do, assuming, of course, that it's legitimate and that it's that nothing illegal is. But they are paid to zealously defend their client. That's what they're supposed to do. That's their job. Correct. Now, a judge, on the other hand, is supposed to be, not defending a position. I'm trying to think of the right word, and I apologize.
It's supposed to be open.
Objective, open, exactly.
Listen.
Looking for the truth. So what we want to do is we want to train ourselves to be the judge, not the lawyer. To train ourselves to put our egos aside, and rather than trying to just defend our position, even if we might be wrong, to instead be, as you said, be open and to both sides and both views. And to the interesting thing, the paradox is, to the degree that we do that, we actually are much more likely of persuading the other person to our side, because they can see, they can tell we're not doing it in order to dogmatically make our point, but we're searching for the truth.
Right. And this is so important because this is also a way to garner respect. Because if you are open to listen and then you give your position, then you take the other side to respect you more, because you didn't give a judgment. You actually were open to listen.
Exactly.
Right. And another thing that I look at my personal life. My son came the other day from school, and there was some verbal attack with the kids, and basically he was asking, what should I do? How would you respond to the attacker without losing your cool, without being angry? Do you feel, and this can apply in the workplace, this can apply in any other setting, but I think that's a great question to ask you, and I would love to hear your take on that.
Well, first, Jacob, when it comes to school, if it's a matter that it was bullying, then that should not be allowed. And that is the job of the school. Just like in a free society, a free market-based economy, government has the sole legitimate function of protecting its citizens' rights, protecting from force and fraud. But in a school situation, no kid should ever be bullying should just not be allowed. So if that's the case, then that needs to be handled in that way. Now, the fact is it usually isn't. And so how do we now, how do we deal with that? Well, and let's just say it's somebody at school who maybe isn't a bully, but it just happens to be that there was an argument.
Right.
Well, in this case, what we need to do, whether we're in 8th grade or whether we're 45 years old in a corporate environment, the first thing if we're verbally attacked is to respond and not react. Mm-hmm. I first learned that from Zig Ziglar, who used to say that responding is a positive thing because you're in control of yourself. Reacting is a negative thing because you're allowing the other person to be in control of you. And so the first thing is to just let the person talk and finish what they're saying without interrupting. Because when you interrupt, you're only making this person angrier. You're only causing this person to be frustrated, and they're not going to be able to feel as though they've said what they need to say. Now, once they've finished, then what you might say, and this won't be the same with a young kid as it would be for an adult, but for an adult it would be, I'm wondering, I might owe you an apology. Did I say or do something to offend you? Which you probably didn't. And so this person knows that they were, they were wrong but in doing that, and that they were acting on emotion based on something else. And they're very likely to say, no, I'm sorry. I'm just, having a bad day or this or that. But I do need to tell you, and then they can say it in more of a civil tone. Once the civil tone is there, then you can have a conversation. Then you can find out exactly what you may or may not have done that's caused this person to be angry.
Right.
In school, it might be that your son has to say, again, assuming no physical harm is potential, it might be just something like, I'm not sure why you're yelling. I really don't know what I did, but I'd like to know. And then something like that, at least with a calm voice. So again, you need to reset that person's frame and make it calm as opposed to excitable.
And I like this tip. And in my son's case, it was it wasn't bullying. It was kind of more argument between kids. And I told him a similar thing. I said, first of all, you have to be calm and let the other side be anxious and excited. You come and you have your position, just like you said. If you know you're right, then and they're wrong, then let them be the one who are going to be angry about it.
Yeah, one of the best skills, and you're doing a great job of this with your kids, is to teach them that the person who remains calm is the person who has everyone else's respect.
Right. Absolutely, I love that. That should be a quote. And I try to follow that in my legal practice with my employees here when there is an argument here in the office. And sometimes it happens. The key is to try to be very calm, try to find out what is the real reason why the argument occurred, and try to resolve it in a very calm and logical way, as opposed to go to the emotional. Because emotions, they blur everything, and that's the worst thing that can happen, right?
Yeah.
One thing that I'm curious about, Bob, is can you explain to me what is the difference between persuasion and manipulation, and how do you best can persuade people to support your cause? I mean, and especially in the legal field, in any business where we counsel people, I find it to be very interesting to understand the play between those, persuasion and manipulation.
Well, that's a very important question, and so let's look at the difference. And before we do, let's look first at the term influence and ask what it really means. My definition of I would define influence as simply the ability to move a person or persons to a desired action, usually within the context of a specific goal, if you will. So there are basically two general ways you could do this, Jacob. One would be through manipulating a person, and the other one would be through persuading them. Now, the two of them, manipulation and persuasion, are certainly cousins. Now, why do I say, well, of course, one is the evil cousin, that would be manipulation. One is the good cousin, that's persuasion. But why do I say they're cousins? Because both the manipulator and the persuader, they both understand human nature. They understand human nature. They understand what moves people to action, and they're able to do that. But that's where it ends. Otherwise, there is a huge difference. And it can best be explained from a book that was written in 1986 by Dr. Paul W. Sweats. It was an excellent book. It's called The Art of Talking So That People Will Listen. Though really, as you can imagine, it was much more about listening than it was about talking. And in the book, I think he did a wonderful job of explaining the difference. According to Dr. Sweats, manipulation aims at control, not cooperation. It results in a win-lose situation. It does not consider the good of the other party. In direct contrast to the manipulator, the persuader seeks to enhance the self-esteem of the other party. The result is that people respond better because they're treated as responsible, self-directing individuals. And for responsible, we could say response-able. And that's really the key. So it begins, the big differentiator is intent. Now, that's where it begins, but not where it ends. Because, see, the manipulator, who is, again, win at all costs, they may not want to necessarily hurt the other person, but if that's what it takes to get what they want, they'll do so. In other words, it's win at all costs. They are very I-focused or me-focused. With a persuader, that would never happen. For a persuader to feel good about it, they have to know that you came away a winner as well. And this is why, this leads to the next difference, and that's this. A manipulator, once you've been manipulated, you will do your best to avoid this person, to resist this person, to have nothing to do with this person. Even if you have to work with them or be around them, you'll do your best to not have anything to do with them. After all, you know they're a manipulator. They've broken all trust.
Sure.
When you've been persuaded, well, you feel great about that person, so you're much more likely to buy into further suggestions. So a manipulator, Jacob, can have employees, but very rarely, probably never, a loyal team. A manipulator can make the sale, but rarely have repeat customers and almost never have referrals. And a manipulator can have a family who loves them and who they love, but very rarely is it a functional family. So not only is it good life practice to be a persuader rather than a manipulator, it's also good business practice.
Absolutely. And do you think there are any signs where we can spot a manipulator before we get fooled or taken advantage, or is it just something that is very difficult to spot?
Well, some people are better at it than others, certainly. But really, here's what you look for. A manipulator will try to use your emotions and low self-esteem in certain areas against you. In other words, they will try to, if you don't comply with their wishes, they'll try to make you feel guilty or foolish or wrong or bad or sad or what have you. So if you ever are in a situation where you're feeling yourself kind of about to do something that you really don't want to do, ask yourself why you have these feelings. Right. Okay? And your answer will probably be that this other person is asking you to do something that you really don't want to do. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how you know.
Like some things. Yeah. To me, a lot of the things that you talk about in the book and some of the things that you advocate, you have to. I feel that you have to have those people skills. You need to have the experience. But I'm wondering, how do you develop those people skills to be able to be a great person, a great communicator, a great influencer? I'm wondering if you have some tips for people who are not, who say, well, I don't have the people skills. I shouldn't be doing any of that. I'm going to fail. Do you think there are some ways to develop people skills to be great at it?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, that's why I wrote the book, because this specific area of success, people skills, has proven itself again and again to be the determining factor between the average or even reasonably successful person and the one who's able to accomplish great and significant levels of achievement. So I think it's very important. Anyone absolutely can learn. Now, some people, like anything else, like a baseball player or an artist, right, they might have an inclination that gives them the edge, but really anyone can learn these skills. And so there are 5 principles that I share in the book that
Right.
And what I do in the book is after the first chapter, which is an explanation of the 5 principles, I simply tell stories. And they can be that some of them are half a page, others are 3 pages, most are somewhere in the middle, where I put people in these situations that they've been in before, are in now, or will be sometime in the future, and pretty much just give them the way to handle it. But of course, it's not just the words, it's the understanding. And so I've tried to make that very easy. But it's based on 5 principles, what I call 5 principles of ultimate influence. And those are control your own emotions, understand the clash of belief systems, acknowledge the other person's ego, set the proper frame, and communicate with tact and empathy. And they're actually very, very simple and very intuitive once you're exposed to them.
And so, do you have maybe a little example of a real life situation of one of those principles?
Absolutely. Let's take setting the proper frame. Number 4. What is a frame? Well, a frame is the foundation from which everything else evolves. So set the proper frame, and you're really 80% there to getting the results you want and having it a real win-win. Let me give you an example. I was in a Dunkin' Donuts store, and there was a little boy, I'd say 2.5, 3 years old, a toddler, and he was running around the restaurant, the Dunkin' Donuts store. And his parents called him over, so he began to walk over to his mom and dad, and all of a sudden he slipped and he took a spill on the floor. He fell to the floor. Now, he didn't hurt himself, but you could tell by the look in his face he was very, very surprised. He intuitively knew this wasn't supposed to happen. So he immediately looked at his mom and dad, the 2 people he trusts more than anyone in the world, because he wanted their what? Their interpretation of the event. I mean, what happened happened. He fell.
Sure.
He wanted to know, okay, what comes next? And I really believe, Jacob, that had his mom and dad gotten upset or panicky or, oh, my poor baby, are you okay? He would have started to cry. But what they did was they handled it beautifully. They smiled and they applauded and they laughed and they said, oh, that looks like so much fun. What a good trick. And immediately he began to laugh. Now, what the parents did is they set a very productive frame for him to operate from. And we can do this in every interaction we're about to have. It could be as simple as a genuine from the heart smile. Or it might be, let's say we're at a mixer and we're in a group and somebody walks in and it looks like they'd like to join the group, but they don't know if they're welcome. It may be as simple as opening up the body language a little bit just so they know that they're welcome. But we also have to, let's take it a step further. We also have to know how to reset someone else's already negative frame. For example, let's say there's a challenge and you need to speak with a supervisor. And the person at the front desk goes back to the supervisor, and even though you were polite, they probably say something, oh, there's a customer with a complaint or something like that. Well, the supervisor has been working his job for 10 years, probably hates his job, has to deal with people like that 10 times a day, so he's ready to be polite, but still quote the rule book, right? And make things as difficult as possible. He puts his game face on, and when he comes out, ready for, he's in the frame of a adversarial situation. But when he sees you, what do? You smile, a genuine smile. We put our hand out, we take a step toward him, and I might say, hi, Mr. Johnson, Bob Burg. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to visit with me. I know you're very, very busy. Boom. We've now just reset his frame from one of 2 adversaries to one of 2 allies who are just looking for a mutual win. And people like you, people who do that, he wants to please. These are exactly the kind of customers he likes. So something as simple as that can absolutely turn a situation from adversaries into allies.
And it's beautiful how you describe it, because it's all in our mind. If we change something small, everything changes. The whole situation changes, and the result changes because of that.
Yes, exactly.
Bob, one of the things that is interesting in your book, and I wanted to ask you, James Altucher wrote a recent book. It's called The Power of No. And basically he talks about why it's so important to not to be overcommitted. And he's saying every no makes space for the perfect yes. It's impossible to thrive in an overcommitted world. And
Right.
you, in your book, you say that one of the most difficult things as human beings is to tell somebody no. It's very difficult. And I wanted to ask you first of all why, and how do we overcome that? Saying no.
In terms of why, it's simply because we're human beings. And most of us have a need and a desire to please others. And so we say yes to things. And now there's nothing wrong with that if it's something we really want to do.
Right.
If it's something we're doing out of strength and not out of a sense of obligation or sacrifice. It's fine when we want to. It's not fine when we don't want to. And as James says, it can be very, very costly to say yes when you should say no. The key is to say no in a way that is respectful and at the same time honors your boundaries. Now, I know James. I've read some of his. I don't know him personally. I know some of his work. He's brilliant. I have not read that particular book, so I don't know exactly if he talked about saying no in there, about how to. But what I do is what I suggest. First of all, let me suggest two ways not to say no. One of the ways I often hear, and this has become very politically correct lately, and I've seen it on talk shows and I've seen it at seminars, and I certainly don't mean to disrespect anyone else, and I won't mention any names, but I've seen people give the advice, just tell people no. No is a complete sentence. And the challenge I have with that, Jacob, is that sounds fine in theory, and people typically nod their heads in empowerment as though, okay, from now on I'm just going to say no. But my question is, really? I don't say that, but are you going to say no that way, though? Or are you going to just say to somebody, no? Well, here's the problem with that. First, it's rude. Secondly, and it's unnecessary. Secondly, you're turning a potential ally into an adversary if you do it that way. You're also cutting off any potential opportunities you might have to do something with this person. But the biggest reason for not saying no that way is that it's totally incongruent with your value system of treating people with respect. So I understand the advice. I don't think it's productive. The other thing people will do is they'll kind of fib and say something like, well, I would, but I don't have time. The challenge with that is it's not that you don't have time, it's that you don't want to do it. Right. Because as human beings, we find the time to do things. We don't have the time. We find the time to do that which we want to do. So it's kind of fibbing, which you don't feel good about, but also that person's going to probably come back with an answer that's going to be very persuasive and show you that time is not an issue. So now you either have to admit you are lying or you need to save face by doing the thing you don't want to do. That's also not productive. So here's all you do. Very, very simple. You simply say, thank you so much for asking. While it's not something I'd like to do, please know how honored I am to be asked. And that's it. You've thanked the person. You've let them know you're honored. You have not made an excuse. You haven't given them something to grab onto. You've basically very politely and honorably said, it isn't something I want to do, but I'm very honored to be asked.
Beautiful. I love that. And in fact, I'm going to use it myself this week and see how much overcommitted obligations I can free from my calendar.
Yeah. Now, for that, Jacob, when someone says, especially someone who may know that that they can maybe coerce you into doing it, if they answer by saying, "Oh, but I really need, we really need it, and it would be really," you simply, again, with no defensiveness, with no emotion other than kindness, you'd simply say, "Oh, again, I so appreciate the offer. Thank you. I'd just rather not," and that's it.
Excellent. Very simple, but most people don't do it.
Right, exactly. They will go to that excuse, and that's where it's not going to turn out well.
Excellent. And Bob, as we come to the end of our show, I would like you to maybe verbally state where our audience can find you online if they want to connect with you, and where can we get your book?
Yeah, best thing to do is just go to Burg, BURG.com. And while there, they can subscribe to my Influence and Success Insights. They can download. They can get chapter 1 of The Go-Giver, which is my other book, and Adversaries into Allies.
Excellent. And Bob, one tip as we end our show, if we were going to share one tip with the audience for 2015 as to how to turn adversaries into allies in any setting, what would that be?
I would just say to realize that in the end, as Dale Carnegie said in his famous book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, ultimately people do things for their reasons, not our reasons. So we need to ask ourselves those questions, such as, how does what I'm asking this person to do align with their goals, their wants, their needs, their desires, their values?
Excellent. Thank you so much, Bob, again for coming on the show. It's been a true pleasure and an honor to have you here. And this is Jacob Sapochnik, enchantinglawyer.com. If you have any questions or comments about this episode, please email me, or you can leave a comment at the bottom under the blog post. And we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you so much, everybody. And thank you again, Bob.
Thank you, Jacob.